Thanks, Lisa. I'm so glad to be here and share my journey with other people who are going through this as well.
My pleasure. So I'd love for you to give our audience some context. Introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background and what your occupation is.
Yeah, so my name is Lindsay. I am 33 years old now, but I am a teacher. I've been teaching for 5 years in New York City public schools. I live on Long Island, very close with my family that lives here, and I've been married for 4.5 years now to my husband, Nick.
Yes, and I want our audience to know that we do know each other. I've taught Lindsay yoga through her fertility journey, and I'm really happy that we know each other. So you are married, and how long have you been married with Nick?
4.5 years.
And right away, when you got married with Nick, did you want to start having a family or not?
Oh no, absolutely not. Nick absolutely wanted to start right away. I was not ready. I had the day we got married, 5 days later, I started teaching. So I kind of wanted, and I was in grad school full time, so I wanted to really just take some time to adjust to my new career and being married, and just enjoy some time being married before I started having children.
Yeah, that's great to know. And just like me, Lindsay, I felt exactly the same way. When I first got married, I wanted to just focus on my career, and kids were on the back burner. But I'd love for our audience to know, like, did you, even though you didn't want to have kids right away, did you figure that you would, want to have kids down the road, or for the time being, you just wanted to keep putting it on the back burner?
I wanted to put it on the back burner for a while. I never really, when I was younger, wanted to have kids until I really thought about getting married. Then I was like, okay, I want to have them eventually. But I really wasn't sure when I'd be ready.
Can you talk us through maybe some of the reasons why you weren't ready to have kids right away? Was there anything in particular that, or did you just think that, for the time being, you just wanted to enjoy being married?
Yeah, I mean, I started a new career literally days after getting married. So that was a little bit of a whirlwind. And I planned my wedding before my career changed. So that was one thing. And then there were just still things I wanted to enjoy time with my husband and just grow in our relationship so that it could be stronger. I know that having kids just from people around me always adds stress and adds things like that. And I wanted to make sure that our relationship was, that we had time to have fun as a young married couple and have a really strong relationship by the time we had kids. And there were things I wanted to travel more. I guess I had this terrible notion that once I had kids, my life was then over. So
Yeah.
I wanted to travel. I wanted to get in really good physical shape. I wanted to see the world and do things that in my mind, you couldn't do with children,
Yeah.
which I am now seeing, very new mom, but I'm having a new perspective that if you want your kid to do things with your kids, you can. But a few years ago, I was like, yeah, no, I just want to do things, just me and my husband, and explore the world and do things like that.
I completely understand, Lindsay. I was in the same boat as you. I felt exactly the same way. I was really apprehensive about having kids. I felt like they would just basically, drain my energy. And there were so many things that I wanted to do, but definitely having kids, having a child has just changed my life. Did you eventually start talking about family planning, and what was that like?
Yeah, so I think for my husband and I, we were, in the terms of having fertility issues, we were really lucky in one aspect, as much as that could be, is we were aware that I had a pre-existing condition that may cause fertility problems. So I knew that I was on the pill, and so I knew that once I got off the pill, I would need to start trying right away because of my pre-existing condition. Um, I struggle with endometriosis. So once you're not on birth control, the risk of your endometriosis growing, that's what keeps it at bay. So I knew that once we started that, it was something that we had to I don't know how to say it, move fast on, but like we couldn't just be like, let's get off the pill and see what happens. Like we had to be actively trying because I didn't want my endometriosis to grow any larger. Um,
Yeah. So let's talk about what was going through your mind when you were trying to conceive and you didn't get pregnant right away.
well, we had a little bit of a complicated situation. We decided to start trying probably about a year and a half to 2 years into our marriage. And I got off my pill and we started trying. It was very exciting. It was really exciting when we first started trying. And then my grandmother became very ill. And so I was one of her main caretakers. So we paused in trying just because like it was kind of that whatever happens, happens attitude that I didn't want to take on, kind of took place because I was so busy caring for her. Um, so that caused a delay in our fertility journey. And my doctor told me that I had to be actively trying in order to seek fertility help. And I was very honest that I wasn't actively trying for about probably another year. So it wasn't until we were married about, oh my God, I can't even keep track of time, a little bit longer, another year of being off the pill, we started actively trying again. And once I no longer had to care for my grandmother, I was able to really, she had passed away and it was really hard for me, but I think I used that to like, I focused all of my energy at first into trying to conceive. I had two different apps that I was tracking my cycle with. And that's the one thing I did throughout caring for my grandmother was I tracked my cycle off the pill to figure out if I had a regular cycle or not, which I had a fairly regular cycle. So once we started like actively trying again after my grandmother passed, I maybe put too much energy into trying to conceive. I had two different apps. I was using ovulation sticks. I was taking pregnancy tests every month. Tracking my cervix size. I was like all or nothing, like anything you could do to track your cycle and track your fertility, I was doing it. Um, and just, monitoring every time we had intercourse, things like that on my apps. And so I was really committed and it almost consumed me and it became so stressful for me. Just the tracking and the monitoring to the point where it was overwhelming. It took over everything I did.
Wow, that's tremendous that took it up into your own hands to really take control of your fertility.
Mhm.
So tell us, Lindsay, at what point were you like, enough is enough? I'm going to just, go see a fertility doctor. And what was that like for you?
Well, I talked to my OBGYN about it, like when we had started trying, and she said that we either had to have intercourse exactly when I was ovulating for 5 days or every other day a month. So we tried both methods, various months. And she said I had to try for 6 months. So at 5 months, I had the calendar marked date of when we were trying. Well, endometriosis from like a, a a doctor standpoint is they say that it usually, if you have it, it doesn't mean you're going to have fertility issues. There's still a very good chance you're going to get pregnant. So it's not like an automatic, like, oh, you have endometriosis, you're going to struggle with fertility. So I've found that people were a little bit apprehensive that endometriosis was causing my infertility. Um, and so, but I had known about my diagnosis for more than almost a full decade. Just it was found accidentally. It was just a cyst in my ovary, and so they thought it was very unlikely that it would cause any problems. And I knew when I had this like gut feeling that it was going to affect my infertility.
Mm.
Or affect my fertility. I just knew it was a gut feeling. My mom, my husband were like, you need to have a positive attitude. And I was like, no, it's not a negative attitude. I'm committed to trying and doing my best. But it was just something in my insides, my gut, that told me that this was bigger than what they were able to see. Um, it was just an intuition that I had. And I was like, it wasn't a bad attitude. I still wanted to try naturally. So I asked my OBGYN for two referrals and she gave me, I picked one doctor. I went to this doctor. It was right when COVID started. So it was, everyone was kind of figuring out how to run like a fertility clinic or any sort of
Yes.
life as normal. So our first meeting was remotely, which I wasn't thrilled about, but given the time, it was the best we can do. And something about the doctor I met with the first time, she was very set that just because I had endometriosis did not mean that I was going to have issues with fertility. And to me, that like really rubbed me the wrong way. I was like, I've been trying for 6 months. And if I know I have a pre-existing condition, that made the most sense to me to at least start there to figure out if that was the problem. My husband had got his sperm analyzed, and his sperm was great. Everything that needed to be there was great. So I was like, if we knew this was the problem, and why wouldn't we look into that first? And the doctor really didn't want to. And so that didn't sit well with me, but I was like, it was over Zoom. She felt very dismissive, but I was like, all right, I'll give her another chance because, we're all adjusting to this digital world. Maybe she
Right.
just didn't come off well in this. And so she wanted to, so it was very uncomfortable for me, because I felt like she was very dismissive of my pre-existing condition and didn't really hear what I had to say.
Of course. I mean, just the fact that you're, going through what you're going through and during a pandemic, I give you so much credit, Lindsay, for being so strong. And, talk us through the cycles that you went through so that those who come upon our interview can kind of somewhat gather some resources to kind of relate.
Do you mean like the
The
cycle,
cycles.
like
Yes.
IUIs and stuff?
Yes,
Mhm.
exactly.
Yeah. So
Start
I,
from
I
the first one. Yes,
Yeah, so I
please.
was with this doctor that I wasn't too thrilled with. I
Yeah.
don't honestly even, I think I did one cycle of IUIs with her, because she had ordered an MRI to take a better look at my endometriosis, which
Mhm.
but only because I pushed her to. She wasn't really going to look into it further, but I was very upset about not that. So she ordered an MRI because on a sonogram, you could only see the cyst in my ovary.
Mhm.
And so while we were waiting for those results, she said, let's try an IUI. So I was like, sure. And so for people who don't know, an IUI is when you inject sperm into the vaginal canal. It really just helps it get in further so it could reach your eggs. It's just closer to release your eggs. So the sperm have to swim further. But considering there was like no evidence of low blockage and my husband's sperm was healthy, I didn't really know what that would do, but I was like desperate and ready to try anything.
Yeah.
So I did do one IUI cycle with this first doctor. And even after, I never actually met the doctor in person. She was never in the office. And I really didn't like that. So I went and to my OBGYN, and she gave me a second referral. So I went to this other doctor, which I was very reluctant to go to because he was a man and I felt more comfortable with a woman, but I went for it. A Zoom meeting again, and he was absolutely on board. He wanted to take a much more aggressive approach. He wanted to look deeper into my endometriosis. He was waiting since the other doctor had sent me for an MRI, he was going to wait for those results, but he said he absolutely thought we should be taking more aggressive measures depending on the MRI results. Because endometriosis could be a real block to fertility. And that's how I knew that was the right doctor for me, because he really was listening to my concerns and heard my concerns. And he also asked me like how I felt and things during my period cycle. And
Yeah.
I knew I didn't feel right. I had very severe symptoms from my endometriosis, which was a cue for him that it was maybe more severe than sonograms were showing.
Good to know.
So I switched doctors. I didn't even wait for the results of the IUI. Like I didn't even wait for the cycle to finish to find out if I had gotten pregnant or not. I had
Yeah.
switched doctors
Wow.
before that was done because I just didn't like the vibe I got from the first doctor. The
That's
MRI.
brave. I mean, Lindsay, a lot of people have that emotional attachment. And what you're saying is so valuable because you're saying basically that you had that instinct and you acted on it. Other people kind of like have that instinct, but they keep going through and they keep getting the same results. So what you did is really courageous. And
I
I'm
just
I
Yeah.
wanted to just elaborate on that because someone may be listening again and may think that, I shouldn't listen to myself, but you're saying act, don't wait. Time is of the essence.
Yeah, I mean, I'd already been trying for 6 months, and I was like, I don't want to try anymore. It takes a whole year to make a baby. Like, I don't want to go anymore. That's like a whole nother year before I can have a baby if I spend more cycles with this person that doesn't believe it, to believe what I believe. So I went to this new doctor, and when the old doctor had called me with the MRI results, I didn't even give her a chance to tell me what they were. I just said, I'm really sorry, I'm no longer coming to your practice. Can you please forward the results to my new doctor? And she asked why, and I said, I found a doctor that wants to take a more aggressive approach. And she said, yeah, looking at the results of this MRI, that's probably best.
Wow.
And so I was like, yes, I just felt so good about it. I felt like a huge release of stress.
Yeah.
And once I went to the new office for the doctor, I mean, all the stress of like I said, I went above and beyond and tracking my cycle and peeing on sticks, and I was like peeing on sticks every day, whether it was an ovulation strip or I was driving myself
Yeah.
nuts.
Yeah.
And I realized like this is not the best thing, but it's like I like to have a lot of control over things, and being pregnant and getting pregnant and being a parent, you do not have that control at all. But somehow with the fertility clinic, once I found the one that was the right fit for me, I felt like I had control over my body in some weird way. In terms of like I was able to really understand what was happening in my body from a medical standpoint. I understood what my hormone levels meant. I understood when you go to fertility treatments, you go so often to the doctor, and they're constantly checking your blood levels. And while that was very, very stressful, I was able to understand better what my body was doing and why it was doing it, when it was doing it. And that actually eased my mind a little bit, knowing that I
Brilliant.
had this like intervention that was trying to help me rather than me just trying to do it on my own.
So talk to us about, the cycles leading
Mhm.
up to this
Yeah.
success so that the viewer can kind of,
Oh,
get some information and
yeah.
resources from everything you've been through.
Absolutely. So my MRI results showed that my endometriosis was a lot worse than we had anticipated. But the thing about endometriosis is you can't actually, there's no way to see it all. It's impossible. There's no way to really diagnose it. It's like an undiagnosable thing that gets diagnosed, and
Yeah.
it's so you can't see everywhere. So my doctor said that it was maybe a stage 2 or 3 of endometriosis, and it runs out of 4 stages, one being like a little bit, 4 being a lot. They thought I was stage 1 before. I automatically moved to a stage 2 or 3. So he referred me right away to a surgical OBGYN to get a laparoscopic surgery to remove my endometriosis. But obviously it was COVID, everything was backed up.
Yeah.
Um, so he said it was going to take, I mean, I started this process in like May or June of 2020 with the first doctor, and I didn't get surgery until November. Um, so this is all over that span from May to November when I got my surgery. And so his perspective was, listen, everybody says it's not impossible to get pregnant with endometriosis. It's still a possibility. It doesn't look like there's a blockage. Let's try while we have to wait anyway. And I was very, very fortunate that my insurance covered a lot of my services.
That's
So I was able to find out that my insurance would cover up to 6 IUIs.
that's excellent.
So if it didn't cover it, I might not have gone for it. But he encouraged me to try an IUI cycle or 2. So we did 2 more cycles of IUIs. So again, that's where the sperm is just inserted into the vagina. And we did those until I was able to schedule a date for my surgery. And I met with the surgeon, and she definitely thought that everybody was on board. I went to a surgeon that my doctor recommended, so in the same building. So they worked together in the past. So that made me feel really good that they were in contact and they communicated with each other as well. So we did 2 more IUIs. They both failed. So there was no pregnancy resulting in any of them, but I knew that I had the surgery to look forward to.
Yeah.
And I knew that the chances of the IUI succeeding with my case were low, and they were kind of just like let's give it a shot
Yeah.
rather than sit back and do nothing. So,
Exactly.
so in November, I got surgery to remove my endometriosis. It ended up being a stage 4 endometriosis.
Wow.
Once they got in there, it was much worse than they could have imagined, which also let me know that that was like a lot of reasons that I was having a lot of other pains and a lot of other health problems were the cause being caused by that. Because I felt like immediate relief from a lot of other stomach issues and cramping and back pains and tons of other things that were bothering me, just got better.
Good for you.
So I had to heal from the surgery before we were able to try anything else because it was an abdominal surgery. So they didn't want me to get pregnant
Wow.
right away. Um, oh, I'm sorry, important. Before my surgery, they were concerned about how bad the endometriosis might be and that I might lose an ovary. So
Wow.
before my surgery, I did remove eggs from I did one retrieval, which is
Hmm.
called, where
Hmm.
we took out eggs from my ovaries, which was a process that I could never have imagined. It was a lot of shots every day, tracking of my cycles, taking shots. My husband was giving me shots. He was so wonderful. And for days, tracking my hormones, watching how big my eggs were growing. So we got, I believe, we got a lot of eggs. We got
Wow.
I think we got like 20 eggs or something.
Wow.
We got a lot,
A lot.
and something around there. And then we made embryos right away because I was with my husband and we were obviously planning on having kids together. So we created embryos, and 10 ended up growing until full growth. So
Hospices.
they grew,
Uh-huh.
yeah, so they grew big enough. So 10 embryos were frozen for use later.
Nice.
But we
Wow.
weren't going to try and use them first because we knew that the endometriosis would possibly cause problems with the shape of my uterus and the embryos being able to attach. So then I had my surgery. My embryos were waiting for me, and I recovered. I was supposed to go in January. It was a 2-month recovery, so I recovered November, December. I was supposed to go in in January for to start my with my whenever I got my period next in January. I was supposed to go in to start my cycle, and I got COVID,
Wow.
which was probably the most devastating thing because I had gone through this whole surgery. I was
Of
bedridden for
course.
2 weeks. And we got COVID, and they obviously wouldn't let me into the office.
Wow.
And that was like the most devastating thing
Of
that could have
course.
happened, because I had to push it back one more cycle. And to me, one more cycle, I was
Mhm.
very nervous. Even though they removed my endometriosis, there is no guarantee they got 100%, and there's a pretty good chance it's going to come back. So I was just very nervous, like waiting a month would do
Right.
something terrible.
Right.
But they assured me that a month is no time at all in terms of things
Right.
growing back. But in that moment, it felt like the worst thing that could have ever happened in the world. I mean, I was
Of course.
asymptomatic with COVID-19, actually, pretty luckily.
Wow.
But it was just the fact that I couldn't move on with this fertility journey it was devastating to me.
Of course.
Um, but we had gone the next month. And it was again a lot of going to the doctor every day,
Yes.
taking a lot of injections, monitoring all your hormone levels. And then we did a transfer day where we took 2 embryos and we inserted them. And that was probably one of the coolest things I've ever seen in my life. It was really neat I got to watch the whole thing. It was a
Right.
really beautiful thing. You got to watch it on a sonogram.
Right.
The doctor put in like a catheter into your uterus, and they'll tell you when you see like liquid go through, and you know that the embryos have gone inside of you. It was a very amazing and beautiful thing to watch, and
Yes.
it was really
I
great.
remember that clearly. Yes.
Yeah.
And when was that? Just for a date of reference.
February 2019, 2021, February 2021. Yeah.
Wow. Can't
Yeah.
believe it was
Yeah.
just almost a year ago. So, and then
Yeah.
after that, Tell us.
After that, I had to go back a few times in the middle, like in this wait period. We had to wait, I think it was like 10 days. You don't have to wait a full 2 weeks because the embryos were put in, they were already 5 days old. So you got to skip the first 5 days, which I thought was fast science and fascinating.
Right.
So to go back a few times to check my blood levels, to make sure I didn't need any other drugs or hormones to help enhance the likelihood that the embryo would take. Then I went back 10 days later and I took a pregnancy test at the doctor. They said I could take one at home, but I waited. I was like, I'm not messing with it because I don't want to pee on a stick in my bathroom and get a false positive and go to the
Right.
doctor. I trusted the blood test more
Of course.
than I did like the at-home test. And I was like, if I get a false positive, it's going to be too hard. So
Yeah.
I took all of my self-control. And then I took a blood test. I had to go home and just sit there and wait for them to call me. It was like
Right.
torture because I knew they were going to call me at some point that day. Then they called me and said that they had a positive result. It was so incredibly exciting.
Amazing. I
Mhm.
can't believe, I mean,
Mhm.
everything you've been through, Lindsay, you are a IVF warrior, no doubt, you and your
Thank you,
husband,
Lisa.
so
Yeah.
amazing. And now you're the parents of a beautiful daughter.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Lisa.
And, I'd love for you to talk about some of the self-care things that you did along the way during your fertility journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that was key. Like I said in the beginning, I was like obsessive about it, and that
Yeah.
wasn't good for me. It wasn't good for my mental health, my physical health. It was making me feel overtired. It was keeping me up at night. Once I went to the doctor, I realized that I needed to like chill out a little. I actually called you. A friend was doing yoga, and I saw with you, like not for fertility, but I saw your Instagram name, and I was like, yoga for fertility. I used to love to do yoga, and I got out of practice, and I was like, that's something that could help calm me down. So I had you come and do yoga with me. Um, I also made actually in the doctor's office, I ran into like an old friend and
Wow.
I got her number and like from like years before and like we just checked in with each other regularly because I
Oh, that's
found that
amazing.
as supportive as my husband and my mom was and my
Yes,
sisters were them not like going through it, they would often
exactly.
say a lot of things like, oh, next time will be your month or it'll be your time when your time comes and there's a bigger plan for you and
Yeah,
those things are all really wonderful, but they're really not helpful most of the time.
exactly.
So it was really nice to just have someone else to be like, this sucks.
Yeah,
Like
right,
and not in like a misery party kind of
right.
way, but like sometimes you just need someone to say, you're right, that is terrible and that's awful. And it will get better, but it sounds better when it comes from someone who's also going through it.
Exactly.
So that was another thing was connecting with other people who are trying to conceive and struggling to try and conceive,
Yes.
doing yoga. I've read a lot of books just for like enjoyment,
Yeah.
things to get myself out of my head and like instead of like binge watching TV, I found that like reading books got me like a little bit more into other people's my mind off of things in a way that was just a little bit more engaging for me. Uh, I picked up crocheting,
Yeah.
so that was really helpful to relax me as well. And I couldn't really exercise a ton once we started fertility treatments. They wanted me to slow down my exercising, but I did try, like, because I used to run a lot, but I would go for some light runs when I wasn't like trying IUIs. Like in the days leading up to them, I would run and exercise until then. Once you did it, they kind of want you to stay active, but not overactive. So then I
Exactly.
would slow down a little bit.
Yeah, they say, too much exercise isn't good for people as
Yeah.
well. So those are great self-care techniques that you shared with us. What was your relationship with your spouse and your family like when you were trying to conceive? I know
Um,
it can be
yeah.
challenging. And you had even mentioned, just reaching out and finding someone else who was going through the same things that you were help. But can you disclose so that people understand what they may be going through with their spouse and their family?
Yeah, I'm very lucky. I I have an incredibly supportive husband. He was like so patient and like, just like, he's like wants to be a dad since before we met, and I didn't want to have kids right away. And he was so patient, and then like all these problems, and it never felt like anything was like, for me, I projected things feeling like my fault because I knew it was my body that wasn't working. Like we had tests that his body was working, everything was going the way it should. So I felt a lot like it was my fault, and he would often be really amazing and, assure me that this is out of our control and it's going to be patient and take time and we'll do it. And um, he would help me do my shots, which
What a supportive
I was
husband.
really wonderful every night. That was like, we did that together. And so that was really great. And he was amazing. My mom was very supportive as well. I'm very close with her. And so that was really great. She would always check in and ask how things were. And she would try and understand like everything that was going on as well. But it really is, it's like a whole nother world. It's a whole new vocabulary. It's a whole
Yes.
new, it's just like a really strong learning curve of just like new things that you never had to know, and new things about your body. And so it was really hard to, even my husband and my husband wasn't able to come to any of the doctor's appointments with me. So it was, at times it could be like a lot of people in our family knew that we were doing fertility treatment, which was maybe something that if I were to do things again, I probably wouldn't tell. I go back and forth between telling as many people and not telling as many
Yeah.
people, because even though like I'm very close with my mom and my sisters and my husband's family, it's it's exhausting to have to
Yeah.
constantly be checked on and have to be like,
Yes.
yeah, we're still doing a thing and we're still not pregnant. Like,
Yes.
or like, then people watch you if you go out. Are you having a drink? Are you not
Yeah.
having a drink?
Right.
Like
Right.
things like that.
Feeding
And
you, right.
it's exhausting because it's something you're like struggling with. And it's so kind when people check in that you want to be like, oh, you're so nice. You're thinking of me. But now I have to like explain to you what IUI is
Yes.
and what that we
Right.
have frozen eggs and frozen
Right.
embryos. And so it
And
was
it's
this myth.
exhausting. Yeah.
It's exhausting. But it was wonderful to have people checking on me and doing those things, but also exhausting and wonderful at the same time.
Yeah. So can you share with us some of the resources that you turned to when you were trying to conceive? I know you had talked a little bit about it, but can you share with us, like, did you go online for support groups, or did you get books, or what was the best thing for you
Yeah,
at the time?
I started with these apps. Like I think I
Mm.
did Fertility Friend and Glow, and they
Oh,
both
yes.
have these like support net. Fertility Friend doesn't, but Glow I think has like these groups where you could join and people talk about their journeys of trying to conceive. And I was like really into it at first. But I actually found that they stressed me out more.
Mm, okay.
They added more stress because what it did help me in the beginning was learn the lingo and learn the vocabulary and learn the abbreviations and learn a little bit more about the process of what was going to happen or what might happen in the future. But then I got like, I would find myself getting like caught up in reading these things and reading about people's like incredibly stressful journeys. Like
Yeah.
I was, like I said, I feel like we're really lucky. We had our first IVF cycle was a success. We also went in knowing that I had a pre-existing condition. So like, I know a lot of people are going into this journey and they don't have any idea what challenges they might face. They don't know where to start looking. And so, and people try 10 IVF cycles and they don't work.
Yeah.
Um, so I found that like reading all these message boards actually like really just gave me so much stress, because then I would like anticipate like, all right, well, we have to do at least 5 cycles before anything's going to work.
Yeah.
um, so that's like earlier I said how I knew that the endometriosis was going to be a problem. That to me wasn't a negative attitude. That was like an instinct. But then this started like reading all these other stories of people struggling. Sometimes they were like so descriptive that they gave me a negative mindset.
Yeah.
So there was a point where I actually had to like delete them off my phones, and
Mhm.
I just started using my doctor and like my one or two friends that I knew like as real that I knew as real people and what they were going through as my main resources. And I just trusted my doctor. And then occasionally, if there was like a new procedure or a hormone check, I would just Google and I would only let myself read it for like 5-10 minutes, and then I would cut myself off.
That's great. So it sounds as though you did a lot of like self-monitoring and, it sounds like you have to really just be vigilant about
Yeah.
what's best for you out there.
Yeah. I think that was part of my self-care at one point, was deleting those apps, because they
That's
became
great.
like, and it was anything. You can get addicted to your Instagram. But then I would get addicted to these like fertility stories, reading these like stories of challenges, and beautiful stories too. But it tends to be, I feel like, more the negative stories tend to take over on those sites.
Yeah,
It became consuming, and that was like part of my self-care, was getting away from Googling and looking these things up, because it became like too much information. All I needed to know was what I needed to show up at the doctor to do tomorrow.
exactly. Yes. It was good to hear that, you need to protect your mindset because
Yeah.
that's the most valuable thing. Can you tell us, looking back, what would you've done differently during your TTC?
I mean, I don't know. I think in the beginning, I don't think I would have used all those apps to track things and be on so many ovulation sticks. I mean, maybe I would have just tracked my period to know if it was like regular and stopped at that. I think I got far too into it, that it became to take over my life. And I think
Mm,
that was the thing. It's like, it really does take over your life when you want a baby that bad. It's so much
yeah,
easier said than done.
yeah,
And I mean, I'm at a stage in my life where everybody's having babies, so it was incredibly triggering. But I think just like trying to just stay in the moment and do things for myself, to take care of myself, and take care of my relationship with my husband and my family, and be open with people about what I'm going through, even though they're not going to understand. Like I was open with people, and people knew, but I played it off like, oh yeah, it's just this thing we're doing. Like, oh, it didn't work, but we knew it wasn't going to work. Like just being more honest and being like, this is really hard. And it's taking too much energy for me to update you on it. Please
yeah,
check with my husband, like,
yeah.
something like that, to kind of put up some boundaries with people.
So good, so
Mhm.
good. Can you tell us if there's any tips or suggestions that you'd like to give for people who are struggling?
I think the most important thing for me was finding a doctor and a clinic that was a good fit for me, and having a support network of family and friends that I could talk to. But the doctor was like the really big thing for me. Once I found that doctor that I felt like worked for me and my husband, and that I felt like very comfortable asking a lot of questions to, and I felt comfortable pushing back when he wanted to do things that I didn't want to do, or you know like if I had questions or concerns, like I didn't feel uncomfortable asking them. And that was really, I 100% trusted my doctor. So like, anybody who's like ever wanted to know who my doctor was, I would always be like, yes, I would 100% recommend him, over anything. And that was the most important thing to me, was trusting the person who's like really doing a lot of the work, was key
Absolutely.
for me.
Yeah. And I was just going to say, you need somebody on your team that's
Mhm.
going to push you to the next level.
Yeah.
And that's what you need to
Mhm.
fly basically with.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that you shared with us your gut instinct. Like you knew right away and you weren't going to mess
Mhm.
and wait around, and time was of the essence.
Yeah.
So if there was one thing you would love our audience to take away from this conversation about trying to conceive, what would it be, Lindsay?
I think it would be just to like, really, you have to like trust yourself and trust your instincts, and really surround yourself with people who are supportive and patient. But trusting your gut is, I think, the biggest thing. And knowing like when it's okay to not listen to the doctors. Like, I mean, like it's okay to push back with your medical professionals in a kind way, and in a way to get, even
Yes.
just to ask questions and find out if there are other options for you, and there are different ways to try things. Like, do your own research, and know like what's available to you, and don't be afraid to ask your doctor to try something else. And if your doctor's not working for you or with you, then it's okay to change. um yeah.
Perfect. And I'll leave it at that. Well, this has been such an informative, powerful, and you gave us so many golden nuggets throughout this conversation, especially to help this TTC community, Lindsay. I want to thank you for your willingness to share your story with us. And I want to also congratulate you and your husband on
Thank
your
you.
baby, Lily. She's so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
Thank you
I'm
so much,
so
Lisa.
excited for you and what's to come. And I just want to say you are amazing, Lindsay, everything you've been through, and you're just like going to be a guiding light for so many.
Thank you, Lisa.